Should I mute it?
Well, I don't hear any shadow. Does anybody hear anything?
Nope, I don't. Sounds good.
Yeah, and Lisa's out of town.
Okay.
So Carol was the only one, and she's always on really early, so I wondered if she thought something went wrong. But anyway, something could have happened with her too. But I'm glad you're here. Yeah, I finished working on it this morning. I was actually excited about it, and this is probably just what I need. So we've been talking about righteousness, and just as a review, Patty, last week, my computer refuses to upload the videos, but I think
Oh,
we're cleaning all that out. I
okay.
think I'm going to have a much better computer in a little while, but right now, everything I try to do on it doesn't want to do it, and that has been trying. But Mark's been wonderful. He's such a sweetheart. And this is just an aside. You think about how the social world can be hard for some people, but the computer world is really stressful for me. And as soon as something doesn't work or I get a new sign up that sounds threatening, I mean, I just, my emotions go off the chart. And Mark's just quiet, and looks up solutions and comes back and, So I'm really proud. I mean, I'm just pleased that he didn't sleep that much that night, and he was up all day working on it with me. Just glad to do it, so I was grateful.
Good.
Okay, so we were talking about righteousness, and ever since I've been doing the Monday shorts, I think I was telling you about that. No, I am getting the feedback. Do you hear it? It sounds like little critters walking behind me.
I don't hear anything.
No, we don't hear anything.
Okay.
But we can mute it if you want.
Yeah, why don't you mute just so that, well, now it's fine. Okay. So we were talking about righteousness. I Googled righteousness because I get a feeling about the righteousness that we tend to talk about in church doesn't match the righteousness, the richness of the word righteous that it means in the Bible. So last week we took a look at righteousness, and basically it came down to being perfect, moral perfection. And since we can't achieve moral perfection, we need to trust in Jesus' moral perfection. And he makes us righteous before God, and now we have that, and that's all there is to know about righteousness. And yet, if you just picture righteousness that way, you do not understand really what went wrong at the fall. It wasn't that we became morally imperfect. We became unrighteous in ways that really matter. And so I looked at what I just started looking up righteousness in the Old Testament, and it had a tons to do with justice, fairness, how you treat your neighbor, how you treat the poor, the widow, the orphan, the blind, the deaf, the stranger, the alien, the marginalized. And I think this was the last one we did. And Beth, can you read that?
Yeah. Deuteronomy 16, 18 to 20. You shall appoint judges and officers in all your towns that the Lord your God is giving you, according to your tribes, and they shall judge the people with righteous judgment. You shall not pervert justice. You shall not show partiality, and you shall not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and subverts the cause of the righteous. Justice and only justice you shall follow, that you may live and inherit the land that the Lord your God is giving you.
Okay, so you can see from this passage, and there were several like this, and there's some in Genesis, a lot in Leviticus, and then Deuteronomy, which is Moses talking to the people as a second recounting of the law. And you see how righteousness has to do with loving your neighbor as yourself. It has everything to do with justice in the court. And we talked about that. We talked about justice and only justice here, as he says here, and not taking a bribe, not and that doesn't just have to be in the court system. It can be with just, knowing where your bread is buttered, so to speak, and how righteousness has to do with treating your neighbor, loving your neighbor as yourself. And so I just wanted to finish with what was the last one of these so we can get this idea of righteousness and what it means according to the law. Then I wanted to go to Job, I believe is next. And this is Job, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Job was somebody who said that he was righteous, remember? He said that this is not because of my unrighteousness. And so when he talked about his righteousness, this is what he talked about. This is what righteousness meant. So, Beth, can you read that?
Job 29:11-17. When the ear heard, it called me blessed, and when the eye saw, it approved, because I delivered the poor who cried for help, and the fatherless who had none to help him. The blessing of him who was about to perish came upon me, and I caused the widow's heart to sing for joy.
Okay. Now that was what righteousness meant in Job's time. Do you see it? It wasn't a moral perfection that no one can achieve. How do you see that this is something really different from that? I have a dog who wants to go out, but what do you see as a difference? In terms of Job's idea of righteousness and what we consider to think of righteousness today?
Well, it has to do primarily with how we treat those who are in need in some way, who have been buffeted by the storms of life.
Right. And that was how he used his wealth. He was a wealthy man, and that was how he used it. And, in those towns, there was the gate where you would have the judgments and things like that, and he was the advocate, you see, and he goes on.
I put on righteousness, and it clothed me. My justice was like a robe and a turban. I was eyes to the blind and feet to the lame. I was a father to the needy, and I searched out the cause of him whom I did not know. I broke the fangs of the unrighteous and made him drop his prey from his teeth.
Okay, so this is just a moving on from what he had said before. This is just the rest of the passage, and you see how he uses the word righteousness in this. And again, what does it mean to be righteous? And I even like that. I broke the fangs of the unrighteous and made him drop his prey. This is what righteousness consisted of, how you treated the people in your, around you. Now, he probably was in a position of of a judge, so that you could see how important it was that he had this attribute, that this was how he used his leadership. This is what his service as a judge was characterized by, and that's why he's saying, I wasn't unrighteous. Now, do you see the difference between saying, we could sometimes get on Job a little bit if we think righteousness means moral perfection.
Mm-hmm.
And you see, moral perfection is such a vague thing,
Yeah.
But righteousness has to do with how you treat your neighbor, how you treat those in need. And I'm not talking about whether or not you go, over to some ministry and be involved in that. Concern for our neighbor, rather than, the selfish ambition and bitter envy that came in with the fall. What was lost of righteousness was that loving your neighbor as yourself because of the fear and righteousness of God, which was with you. It didn't make you scared. It made you want to be righteous like he is, fair like he is. So any questions or any thoughts here?
No.
You loved the idea of righteousness.
Yeah, righteousness is beginning to have a really rich meaning, isn't it? And doesn't the fact that this is what God is like become a lot more appealing? I mean, a morally perfect God doesn't feel like a warm fuzzy to me. And I'm not saying God's a warm fuzzy, but you know what I mean. Moral perfection is kind of a scary concept. Whereas eyes to the blind, feet to the lame, a father to the needy, that, and that's what Jesus was like. I mean, this is one of the passages that can help us understand that Jesus also was a purely innocent sufferer like Job. Job was a relatively innocent. He was a righteous man who suffered, but Jesus was the perfect righteous man who suffered. You see, and when righteousness looks like this, it can actually help us long for Jesus coming in a way that's a lot richer than, I'm just getting worn out here, I just don't want to be here anymore. And I think it helps give us a better vision for what it means for us to be righteous now, besides thinking of it as something so abstract and perfect we can't wrap our brain around it. We can think about loving and, being fair in these ways. And then I also wanted to talk, and this is coming next, so I went from what righteousness meant in the law, what righteousness meant with Job. But now you remember that God was really, really angry with Israel. And of course he was angry with them for their idolatry. But he speaks, the idolatry led to that selfish ambition and bitter envy. You see, because all the rest of our idols are you basically give it your sacrifices so it gives back something to you that you have over someone else. Do you see? And when you worship a righteous God, it's a completely different direction. So you remember the history of Israel, how they sinned in the wilderness, tested them in the wilderness, and then they were ready to take the land. And under Joshua, they really had, God is generous in his view. They had become a beautiful city to him, especially with David and Solomon. God's not a detailed critic, but look at what he is judging Israel for. Can you read this one?
Mm-hmm. Isaiah 1:21-23. How the faithful city has become a whore, and she who was full of justice, righteousness lodged in her, but now murderers. Your silver has become dross, your best wine mixed with water. Your princes are rebels and companions of thieves. Everyone loves a bribe and runs after gifts. They do not bring justice to the fatherless, and the widow's cause does not come to them.
Okay, that's one in of itself. I wasn't sure if there's another that followed it. But do you see what he hated about the city?
Mm-hmm.
And when our idea of righteousness becomes really privatized, and I'm not thinking particularly about the denomination that we're familiar with, but just in general, when righteousness gets identified with me, what I am, primarily me, am I unselfish? Am I good? Am I, winning over sin? Am I virtuous? All these things that focus in on me. People think then that having fun, celebrating, laughing, dancing, loving people who may not be like you, all of these things they think are non-religious, you see? And what is religious is just a moral purity within ourselves. But you see, that's not what God's complaining about here at all. He's not saying, I hate the city because they celebrate, because they eat chocolate. I think of that movie. I don't hate the city because they're happy. What does he hate? What grieves him about what has happened to Jerusalem?
They're robbing people, bribing people.
Yeah, and what happens to the fatherless or the widow?
They're not receiving the justice that they should.
Yeah, their cause doesn't even come. It's kept out. These are the things that God, he sees, you know, and that it makes so much more sense when you think of Jesus saying that, because it's so much so. In fact, I read this recently, that we turn righteousness into just a self-identity instead of an extension out to others. Oh, good. I'm reaching, you know how memories just go. I had it. It was good. And it's disappeared. Where it doesn't come. But, well, I know I'm talking about righteousness in terms of just something I achieve myself. Oh, I got it. It's back. But how Jesus said in that day, we'll say, Lord, Lord, didn't we? And then they start doing numbers almost. Didn't we do great things for you?
Yeah.
Didn't we, all of the, look, we've got the stats. We've been your people all along. We've got them. And he said, whatever you did do to the least of these, your brothers, you did to me. And whatever you didn't do, you didn't do to me. And again, he's talking about a church here. He's talking about a group of people and where their focus is, because this could easily turn into a scare tactic like, oh no, I got to start doing this. And you can't do it that way. What really has to happen is you have to understand that Jesus loves like this. And he cares about this. He cares about what's fair. And we've talked about it before, that what he says the devil is a murderer and a liar. That's what he's been from the beginning. And God's not either one. And, I had a day today that was, just even driving, I was Cruella de Vil. I didn't even fight it. All I could think of was this poor woman having this procedure and needing to get to the outpatient, and we are driving around DuPont Park, thinking where this guy's going. We went all the way down to Camp Toccoa, which is way out there. No idea where this place is. And I don't know why. It just became everything. It was everything. She's not going to have a procedure. It's going to be all her fault kind of thing. And it wasn't even mental anymore. I failed completely. If it's just about me, I have to come to God and say, I showed my imperfections today. I showed my moral imperfections, and I displayed my moral imperfections today. But when you know that God cares about the widow and the orphan, and he loves sinners, and he loves the sick, I could just come to him saying, it wasn't about anybody, and I don't even know why I ended up that way. I mean, I know I sort of indulged, but man, it had got me. I don't even know what happened. But you love me. I'm your daughter. And you love people, so I'm giving this to you and ask that you help me understand what went on here. And then I don't just try to make excuses for it, or lie about it, because God's righteous. He cares about me. And he cares about this woman who got to it. By the way, we figured it out. We we survived it. And, because righteousness is a reflection of who God is, we can rest in the fact that he cares about us when we're weak, when we're a mess, when we're just us, we can't do any better, because he's righteous. He cares, you see? Now, if he were unrighteous, he would be thinking, and I saved you? After all I did for you, you call yourself a follower of Jesus. And not only that, you can hear things like, I know how many times you've criticized other people for being like this, and look at you. You think you're so hot. That isn't the voice of a righteous God. Do you see how much it matters now to understand that righteousness has to do with loving the weak neighbor as much as you love yourself. And that isn't something we're going to achieve. It's something we're going to learn as we worship a God who's righteous like this. Moral perfection was for the Pharisees. Okay, this is another place where he was upset. Especially these were during times when there was beginning to be famine, and there were tribes, there were countries that were plundering towns, taking over towns. So this was a time where people needed help, and this is what God has to say.
Isaiah 5:7-8. For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah are his pleasant planting. And he looked for justice, but behold, bloodshed. He looked for justice, but behold, bloodshed for righteousness. But behold, an outcry. Woe to those who join house to house, who add field to field, until there is no more room, and you are made to dwell alone in the midst of the land.
Okay, so what were the wealthy doing at a time when there was so much need?
They were just adding to what they had.
Yeah, they were making money out of it, and completely hoarding the very things that people who are starving, and I'm not talking about starving in Africa. I mean starving 10 miles out.
Mm-hmm.
They were not paying attention to that. They were just taking care of themselves. And so, you know how sometimes people just think that God was just like has a bad temper or something when he keeps cursing Israel? Do you understand? I mean, I've read it and read it and read it. This is the nature of the outcry, time and time again. Do you see what difference that makes when you see his anger?
Yeah.
His anger is not, oh my gosh, look at the state of your house, or look at look at your stats, or look at your failures. It's not. That's not what he's about. That's not even what it means to grow as a Christian. What it means is to worship a God who's righteous, who cares, and he cares about us like this. Okay, and I mean, if we are absolutely committed to being hard-hearted in the face of need, he obviously sees that and he cares. But I think for us, usually, for the ones who are taking it right now, we probably more feel like not that everybody else is always wrong, but that we're always wrong, right? Okay, I did it. I admit it. It's my fault. If only, And either way, Jesus wants to gather us under his wing. But do you understand what his heart is full of? What it means to be righteous and what difference that makes. So, okay, this is more into the prophets now.
Isaiah 26:3-9. You will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you, because he trusts in you. Trust in the Lord forever, for the Lord God is an everlasting rock. For he has humbled the inhabitants of the heights, the lofty city. He lays it low to the ground, casts it to dust.
Okay, and it goes on from here, but you see, again, in righteousness, when the rich get rich on the backs of the poor, or the proud are proud on the backs of the unworthy. Either way, God in his righteousness is going to level it out. And you'll see righteousness coming up, yeah, because these were all hits on the search of righteousness. So now, if we want to love our neighbor as ourselves, if we want to worship a God who's righteous like this, and if we're in Christ, his Spirit's working this way, but it's just helpful to know that righteousness is a beautiful thing, not an abstract concept, but if we want to love our neighbor as ourselves, always be fair in our dealings, don't show partiality, believe in a God who loves us like this. These are the promises. Okay, you can read it.
The path of the righteous is level. You make level the ways of the righteous. In the path of your judgments, O Lord, we wait for you. Your name and remembrance are the desire of our soul. My soul yearns for you in the night. My spirit within me earnestly seeks you. For when your judgments are in the earth, the inhabitants of the world learn righteousness.
Okay, and I picked this one because it got kind of like that sense of hungering and thirsting for righteousness. But, sometimes do you ever watch a ball game or watch some kind of sport or watch some kind of Olympic race or something and you move with it a little bit, and you're kind of like urging the person on when you're on your couch and moving? Sometimes I feel like I'm doing that with God in the morning, It's like, here. This is the way, this is what needs to happen, and just moving it. And really, truly, when we begin to understand the size of his love and the size of his righteousness and what that means, the fairness, the fact that he's, sometimes we get afraid to leave people in his hands because we think he's so ticked off. But he's not, I think there's a lot of passages that say he loves the world. God, he so loves the world. And, that when the prodigal left, was he stewing, with smoke coming out of his nose or something, out of his nostrils? No. He was looking for the return. Makes it easier to leave people in the hands of God when you realize that he's righteous, he knows what he's doing, and that we can leave these things and follow him. And then our way is much more level because we're focusing more on following Jesus than we are getting Jesus to follow us, or to get what we think needs to happen. And there was just some amazing things that happened when Anna went on this trip to be with my dad and Pat. And one of the things that happened, that she caught on to very, very quickly. My dad's just, he's kind of, he's Asperger's in the sense, it's not like he thinks, maybe this is a good way. He's just, this is it. And, typical teenager, you sleep until 9. And, to Anna, that made her feel bad enough that she got up at 8:30. Just those snide remarks, that you find yourself, trying to avoid them or trying not to. And then my dad's wife talks a lot about Cameron because she's crazy about him. And he's got cancer, which is hard right now. If you remember Cameron, pray for him. He's first year in college. He could be in complete healing, but he's got to go through his own stem cell transplant, which is like a bone marrow transplant. It's really, really hard. But anyway, Pat told Dean, said, Anna's just like Cameron. She doesn't have as much energy. And I talked to Anna and said, Anna, you scored. And she just looked at me like, why would I care? And she wasn't despising it, but she said, I'm not Cameron. I'm just me, And I just said, Anna, do you have any idea how, including myself, how many people would just die to hear something like that? That's like dressing up like Esau. Jacob dressing up like Esau to get the blessing.
Yeah.
And when you get the blessing, it doesn't mean anything because it's for Esau. But we swear it's going to clothe us and it's going to make us feel that blessing. And Anna already realizes that doesn't mean anything to me because it's not about me.
Yeah.
I thought, holy cow. Sometimes with her, I'm just like, I felt like she scored, but anyway, I got to follow her. But you know what I'm saying? If we think God is a God who wants people to score with him, then we're going to be committed to helping them score with him.
Mhm.
But if we can trust God to know them and love them and know what he's doing with them, and to know them better than we do, and to love them more than we do, and the same true with us. He knows us better than we know ourselves, and he loves us more than we love ourselves. That helps us in terms of fairness and justice and judgment and righteousness to get a better picture of God than the one who stomps out the Israelites. Do you see? Because they didn't do religion right. They screwed up the Sabbath. And they didn't worship the right gods. It's not about that. They were going to the temple. They were doing all those things. It's just at the same time they were robbing workers of wages and things like that, Okay, so next is, and does it, what's that?
Shall I read it?
Yeah, but just a second. What time is it?
Yeah.
It's 2:20.
2:20. Okay. What I want to do now is look at then, if we understand what righteousness is, and then we understand what Israel looked like when they lost it. And of course, it's what we lost at the fall. Very few people were righteous like Job, or God wouldn't be boasting on them, and we see that today. Do you see how that changes then what the hope is for Messiah? What is the hope when he comes? That he's going to, bless our group because we got it right? Or because he's going to be bringing true righteousness? So this is the anticipation of the Messiah that God had. Not necessarily Israel or even us, but these were the gods talking about who was going to come.
There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, and a branch from his roots shall bear fruit. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. And his delight shall be in the fear of the Lord.
Okay. So you understand the branch from the roots of Jesse, that would be David's son. And I love the shoot coming up from a chopped off tree. I love it when I still see that. The life is still there. And the Spirit of the Lord's going to rest upon him.
He shall not judge by what his eyes see, or decide disputes by what his ears hear. But with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek of the earth.
Okay. Wow. I remember Diane Langberg talking about that. It's not going to be, so often in cases of domestic abuse, the husband sounds so much more, or not even the husband and wife. It goes both ways, even though the husband is more often, more likely because he's generally stronger. It can go easily the other way, where the woman's that way. But very often the abuser is more articulate and more clear. Because, part of abuse is to really mess with the minds of the one being abused and confuse them, throwing them off all the time. So then you hear somebody speaking coherently, articulately, and you have someone else who sounds, not articulate, not, the stammering tongue, the confusion, emotional, mixed up. And as what she said with this, he's going to decide with righteousness. He shall judge. and decide with equity for the meek. And very much you get the idea from this too, that one of the things that's hard for us in this country, especially with our background, generally speaking, it's the underdogs who are looking forward to the coming of Jesus. You know, the slaves on the plantations, the people who were suffering. But still, you know, with God all things are possible, and here we are, right? But so often we can be afraid to look needy, afraid to look like we're not all together.
Yeah.
But God he doesn't judge by all that stuff. He judges with this perfect righteousness, which in our case is in our favor. And we do ourselves a great favor when we realize that with him. And maybe we'll just hit one more.
And he shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt of his waist, and faithfulness the belt of his loins.
And I think I mentioned this before, because see, those are the verses that can sound kind of scary, right? But when Jesus walked this earth, he struck the earth with what? With words.
Mm-hmm.
With just words. And those words divided people. You know?
Yeah.
The ones that were hungry, the ones that were thirsty, the ones that had, by God's grace, any need for this Jesus guy who brought them nothing. I mean, hanging out with Jesus wasn't exactly a badge, you know. That it wasn't a violent sort of thing. I just want to make sure. Oh no, this will be later. So next week is going to be our last week for the summer course. Okay, and I want to finish up with just looking a little bit more with then what Jesus did as a righteous Messiah, and then what it means for us, you know, to live for righteousness. We died to sin to live for righteousness. What does it look like for us as the church to be a righteous church? And to me, it's just, I think it's like, I like what C.S. Lewis said. He said, Christianity is a fighting religion. That's why he likes it. But, you know, but it's fighting for the right things. You know, it's fighting for the weak. It's fighting for the people in need. And, but it's not preferring them because it's fighting for what's true.
Yeah.
And September, I don't know when that's going to come up again, but I've been thinking about that a lot, you know, when it's time for us, if September happens, it's been like a year now almost, if court happens, that we will just quietly, confidently speak the truth. And not be scared. I mean, I will be, but I mean, not be more scared than I have to be because I'm not remembering how much the truth matters to Jesus, and how much being honest, no matter what any daggers are shooting at me, that doesn't matter. It's as precious to Jesus, and that matters, you know.
Yeah.
So, any questions at all?
No.
No, it's good.
It's good.
Yeah, that's good.
The word is good.
Yeah, and I'm so glad it's got some meat to it, you know, righteousness as a word. Okay.
Okay.
Hey, we'll see you Thursday.
Yeah, I just want to tell you, Anna's cool with watching Hikari. It'll put it a lot closer for you.
Oh, really? Okay.
Doesn't it? I mean, because you don't have to go all the way back to Hendersonville and then to Fairview, right?
Oh, it's not Fairview. It's
It's near us.
near us.
Oh, okay. Then do whatever works for you. Whichever's best for you. Don't worry about it then. I didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you guys do whatever, but I'll probably I'll be home in time to have you take me. Okay?
For you, we'll
For,
pick you
for
up.
us to pick you up.
Right.
Yeah, I hope that's what I said. But if not, you got it.
I'm getting in, that's all I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hikari is jumping on me. So.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for getting me and showing up.
Okay.
See you Thursday.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.